Dr. Jazz.
And I want to start this talk with
Jazz.
Perpetual Pendulum and ask you about this new record. I mean, the last record, it's amazing what you guys achieved, I think, in the last more than 30 years. And again, this one, it's even more this feature of such a chemistry you guys have. And I just wanted to ask you your thoughts about the new one and how do you see the evolution, especially of this trio? I mean,
it's hard for me to say. I mean, the record itself was a joy to make, especially because it was during the pandemic, and things were just starting to open up, in that way. So it was great to be able to play again. And we went about it in the normal fashion, which is we had emailed or texted each other ideas or little demos. I'll make a demo, or Peter will send some music of him playing it on the Wurlitzer or on the piano or on the guitar, and we'll just talk about repertoire and hopefully try to get to a place where it looks like we have enough tunes that work together for a record. We don't get too involved beyond that. We've never really made a concept record or anything like that. So it's, in terms of the process of making a record, it's always been pretty much the same. We just try to dig up some things that either things that we've been playing that we haven't recorded, or new things that we're all writing. One of the differences nowadays is that we're all pretty much equally contributing original music. In the beginning days, Bill didn't necessarily. But now he's become very prolific as a composer.
I love his tunes,
and so
me too.
Yeah, his tunes always add a slightly different mood to the record. So I always look forward to what he's gonna contribute, and always look forward to Peter's tunes. I mean, but yeah, we go back a long way, and I think hopefully we're just all kind of better as individuals, as individual players, and I think that hopefully affects how we play as a group. And it's hard for me to be subjective about it, but I think the range of things that we do musically is a little bit more broad. Where the first couple records we might not have played something that went free, whereas now we usually have at least one tune where we might kind of go free on something, and so I think we're just all more and more open-minded, as players.
I mean, it's I checked, it's probably one of the longest working groups in jazz right now, right? I mean, you and maybe, I don't know if Oregon is still active.
Certainly as an organ trio, and I mean, it is. It's a very long-standing trio, maybe one of the longest.
It's very rare nowadays.
We don't play all year, but in terms of us, at least every year going out to some degree live and making records. We've made, I think, something like 13 to 15, records. Either under Peter's name, my name. So, yeah, I think it is. I think it does hold a world record, and somebody should give us millions of dollars for reaching that goal.
Now, how do you playing with Bill and Peter for such a long time? How do you still surprise yourselves and keep it fresh? I mean, of course, you come each with your own experience from a different project, and it's always.
that's always the challenge, I think, for me to surprise myself in any situation. I think, and there's a certain benefit of taking pretty solid breaks, between tours. It always seems fresh when we get back together because we're not, playing all year. But I think everybody's approach is one of individually. I think we're all trying to stay fresh. Bill Stewart seems to always surprise me. There's never a tour where he phrase that in the positive. There's always a point on the tour, or points on the tour where Bill, for instance, will do something where Peter and I will kind of look at each other like, I don't think we've ever heard him do that, I think we're all trying to live out our musical lives with that as one of the goals. We don't want to get bored of ourselves, and we don't want to rely on totally set number of tricks that we pull out of our bag. We're not like a show in that way. We try to play in the moment. But I can only speak for myself. I frequently get tired of myself, and that only pushes me to do better. To try to lean in and try and just kind of go out on a limb and try things. And you have to be willing to fail if you're going to do that. So that kind of goes along with it. But one of the things about the road is you're frequently so exhausted that that you're in a kind of a state of not worrying too much about the gig. You don't have time to get nervous or worry. You're just kind of like in survival mode, and sometimes that can promote a lot of spontaneity. Ironically. So it's not that we don't feel that we're not fresh sometimes. So that's just part of it. You have to have nights where you feel that way in order to have better nights. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had like in October now, my longest tour, which was 17 days. Compared to you, that's like nothing, man. But like, already on day 12, I was like, man, the mute. I felt like I was on
17
autopilot.
Days that's a pretty nice length. Yeah, that would be a nice length, 17 days. I think when it gets beyond that, it can get tricky in a lot of ways. But sometimes when you think you're on autopilot, actually you're just kind of really relaxed, and you're, some good things happen. Other times it can work against you if your nerves are frayed and you let things get to you, like a bad organ, which I experience all the time, or bad sound, or just a really long day that doesn't prepare you for really thinking straight. But so it's always a combination of it's never a simple thing. I mean, you do develop ways to every day is a surprise on the road in other ways. It's just like, are we going to make the gig? Are we going to get our bags?
If you fly,
so so it has a way to keep you on your toes, and maybe that's a good thing creatively. I don't know.
Do you have like a routine going on before a concert, like how to push yourself, like to be there actually, or?
Not so much. I mean, if I haven't been rested, I try to, or just in general, nowadays I try to do some deep breathing. Before a show. That definitely helps me. but I don't have too much of a routine. I try to stretch a little bit, and unfortunately, I can't practice or warm up on an instrument, before Peter can, which I'm always being jealous of guitar players for that reason, or people who travel with their own instruments,
Yeah, that's
so not really, just try to find some quiet time, a little bit of quiet time before you go on stage.
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise, I wanted to ask you about, I did this talk now with a while ago with Ted Poor, the drummer, and he told me he's gonna join you with Larry Goldings project, and
Yes,
I saw some footage from you playing in Paris, and it's become like this huge, amazing party animal, almost, this project. And I wanted to ask you, how did you being part of this one, and where does the story go with Larry Goldings, project?
I'm really hoping that we'll get on the summer festival scene. I know we're going to do. We're possibly going to do North Sea this summer, so that might lead to some other ones. Well, I had been on some of the Scary Pockets sessions as I grew pretty close to Ryan Lerman and this whole generation of this whole scene of influencers, I guess you would say. But actually, I sought out Jack Conte myself when somebody sent me some of their work, some of his work with his now wife, and of their duo called Pamplemousse. And I was really interested in what they were doing visually and video-wise. And so this was before I think I knew. This is maybe before they had Scary Pockets. I got to know Jack a little bit, and I got to know Ryan, and went out to Jack's house that he had then in Northern California, because I was just so curious about what he was doing, how his studio was set up, and how he was making the videos. And so, I'm always you're always looking to the younger generation for for direction. I think that's helped very, especially nowadays. People who are really, really savvy with the internet and stuff like that. It was obvious to me that that's where it was going, that it was going visually, and that the more self-contained you were in terms of all those other skills, the more chance you were going to have to survive in this really messed up music world. So I got to know Jack, got to know Ryan, and it turns out Ryan was a fan of mine, and so he started calling me for Scary Pockets sessions just as a sideman. And then he approached me about, hey, what if we do something that features you, with a Scary Pockets kind of approach, in that, we go into the studio, we all write really quickly for a band, and then eventually he had the idea of getting guests, which I helped him in some cases, get Scofield and Robin Ford, and which was nice because it sort of brought me back into the sort of funky world, which I had been doing very, very early on in my recording. When people started to first know of me, they knew of me maybe from the Maceo Parker days, and from some of the funkier things I was doing with Scofield, and so it kind of has been a good mesh of that, bringing back that part of what I do, and of course has expanded my audience, and it's been really fun getting my name out there with scary with the
I
word
love the
scary next to
title.
it, which
Yeah,
maybe
I love that.
I'll pay for that someday. But no, it's been great. I'm really trying to find the time to fit that in during the year. Touring wise, now that we're touring again, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And people like Scofield and Mono Neon, who also I didn't know about until, well, either through Ryan or just finding him on the internet. Never thought I'd ever share a stage with him. So it's great. I mean, these are like some highly creative people. So it's been really fun.
Yeah, it's nice for you. I mean, also when I see you and Scofield on stage, that Paris gig, it's you seem to enjoy yourself so much. You know, it's like lots of. It's nice to see that.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm having trouble with this chair. Yes. Yeah, we're having a blast. And you know, the more we do that, the more we know the music, because we play like 18 tunes a set, you know. So, and you just play them, which is also not the way that I would have approached it had I not been, you know, in this sort of Scary Pockets configuration. You know, part of their concept is to deliver this stuff in a more not pop, but you know what I mean. Like it's like, you know, their concept is they definitely want me and Sco and Mono, be the ones that kind of stretch out, but in a very kind of limited space. It's still like 3-minute tunes where nobody's doesn't become this like jam band extended jam concept, which is different. You know, it's I think it's smart. I mean, maybe it's unfortunate that part of why that's good is that people have shorter you know, attention spans. But also I just think it's a good model. It's a kind of a newer way of thinking about how to deliver music that does have it does have improvisation in it, but it's got a lot of the characteristics of like a pop, you know, presentation. You know, we're not playing 7-8 minutes. So we're trying to leave people with some succinct, solid statements, you know, which is cool. It's challenging too, but it seems familiar to me because I've been doing, you know, I've been playing with James Taylor for 20 years, and and also John Mayer, and I've been in the studio as a person whose role is not to always be there blowing and stuff. It's like it's about how the band gels and how the band, you know, how you as a group sort of communicate to the audience, you know. So it's a kind of a different challenge of trying to, you get your little moment and you try to be as musical as possible, you know.
It's like you're like the glue, you know. But it's not so nice to hear you in this Scary Goldings. Then you have the Perpetual Pendulum, which is completely, I mean, not completely, but it's a different story there, and everything works. That's so beautiful, you know. It's nice to see you so active in these different spheres, I'll put it like that. So, but I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Maceo, and if you compare, let's say, Scary Goldings project or Scary Pockets to, you know, I love that Life on Planet Groove and Mo Roots. I have those CDs actually still. How was the vibe in that band? And musically, if you compare, I mean, it's hard to compare, but like, if you think back about that project, how it was, you were younger, of course, 30 years, but.
Yeah, well, let's see. Well, one thing specifically for me was that I was the bass player in that context, which was very different experience, and really, you know, definitely helped me in a lot of ways as a musician. But my role there was much more as a bass, in a way, as a bass player, and to really concentrate on that role. And it's just, you know, you're playing with the most authentic funk instrumentalists, you know, on the planet. So I was much more of a backing support role for those guys who just have such strong personalities.
Yeah.
And of course those jams could go on for a while too. I mean, and you wanted them to. It was really fun. You know, we had several different drummers throughout it, and they were all great, including Bill Stewart at the very beginning. Melvin Parker is now deceased. Kenwood Denard, who was on that record. That was the only tour he did, actually. And Jimmy Madison.
Yeah.
It was always a really high level thing where I was just hanging on, you know, just trying to pretend that I was one of these masters of legends of funk, which I owe Maceo everything to for trusting me in that role.
How did you get that gig, by the way, in the beginning?
He heard me at Augie's. He heard me at Augie's, which was the club that is now Smoke.
Smoke, yeah.
He literally came up to find a drummer for a session that he was having that week, because this great engineer was also now deceased, David Baker, brought him up and said, you should check out this guy Bill Stewart, who plays with this organ trio. And that's where Maceo heard me. And then he hired Bill, and then like some months later called me to do the tour for what was the Roots Revisited record Bill was on. That I think the great Don Pullen played organ on the record, but he didn't even hear me play funk, which was funny. So, and actually the first tour and that record was mostly shuffles anyway, and I think that's what he was planning to do. And then when we got to Europe, everybody was calling out, you know, Pass the Peas and, you know, Cold Sweat, Chicken, and it was obvious that people wanted to hear funk. So I just tried to do my best. I mean, I certainly knew James Brown records. But I was really doing my education at the time in terms of knowing about the JB records. And Pee Wee would teach me a bass line, you know, Fred would teach me a bass line, you know, whatever. And and I was also learning the Hammond organ on that tour. Previous to touring, in fact, on the first tour, we were traveling with this Korg, the same instrument that Maceo heard me on probably at Augie's, which was this old Korg double-tiered organ. So I had only experience on fake organs at that point. It was only when we started touring with Maceo that a Hammond organ would be delivered at the gig, and I was figuring out how to play it.
Shit, man.
So.
That's incredible.
And then it was through Maceo's producer at that time, Stefan Miner for Miner Music, who said, well, don't you have an organ trio back home? And I said, yeah, but I'm really a piano player. He's like, no, you sound like an organ player, so let's make a record for my label. And that's how I recorded my first 2 records as an organ player, or as at all.
The Intimacy of the Blues, I mean, and that stuff, or
The Intimacy of the Blues, yes, which is sort of a record I'd like to forget about, but in terms of my knowledge of things, but and then Light Blue,
okay,
which was, I think, a much better record, but that's how it all started. In terms of our being known as a unit, and me being known as a band leader on the organ. It was just completely an accident.
Wow.
Because I wasn't. I was really a piano player who, because of little clubs not having pianos, I kind of started experimenting with that idea. playing left-hand bass. I mean, I actually as a kid I was always playing left-hand bass, either on a synth or on the piano. I loved doing that, so I think it was a natural thing for me. At least that part of it was. And then I just started learning more about the organ records, but it was sort of an accidental thing.
Interesting. Wow.
And I have to say, Joey DeFrancesco had a lot to do with reinvigorating the organ, the Hammond organ, jazz Hammond organ scene, because he got signed when he was like 17 or something, to Columbia. So he was on a major record label and sounding incredible, and that was very useful. That was very effective in this kind of resurgence that was definitely happening in the 80s when I decided that maybe I'll go the organ route.
Yeah.
So the late great Joey, we owe a lot to him.
Yeah, definitely.
For that.
Yeah. How was it like for you? You know, talking about New York in mid 80s. You immediately kind of hooked up with Peter, right, and Bill, but what were the first connections actually in New York?
Peter and I met at the Eastman High School summer jazz program in 1984.
Already? I didn't know that. Okay.
Junior in high school, and he was going to be a senior in high school, and that was a very important summer. I met a lot of interesting, great people that summer, but Peter, the most significant in terms of how, you know, also this great cat Joey Cavacino, alto player who knew Arnie Lawrence, the guy who started the New School Jazz program, and he was the one who told Peter and I about the beginning of this jazz school, and that's how I got the idea of maybe going to New York and going to that school. Okay. So when I got to New York, Bill had already been there from Iowa, and but he was going to William Patterson, I think.
Oh yeah.
And Peter also was at William Patterson, and then Rutgers, or maybe the other way around. And he introduced me to Bill. He got us all together one day at the New School, and I don't know, just kind of clicked. We had the opportunity to play a bunch of, you know, frequent gigs up at Augie's, and then later the Village Gate because of my friend Raphael Dulugoff, and just little places to play.
Yeah.
And then when the Maceo thing happened, and then we had the opportunity to make a record, and
then it's
the rest is history, I guess.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I wanted to ask you also about. I think you played with I have you on some of my favorite records, actually. You know, and first I would like to ask you, how was the story with Jim Hall? And you know, he's one of my biggest heroes, or maybe beside Bill Frisell and I guess Scofield guitar-wise, or Abercrombie. But you know, you played with him for such a long time, and do you remember the first time you actually played with him, and how did the hookup?
Sure. Well, Jim was on the faculty at the New School, and that's how I met Jim. He was my improvisation. He was my group, my whatever they called the class. Jazz combo teacher. Jim Hall. I mean, it's just like it was incredible. And if my memory serves me correctly, I mentioned Raphael Dulugoff. He's the son of Art Dulugoff, who started the Village Gate. Raphael was, I think, first booking me as a solo pianist on Fridays and Saturdays on the terrace from 6 to 10. And I told Jim that. And one day Jim and Jane, his wife, showed up to that gig where I was just playing solo, you know.
Oh wow.
And I think he later told me that was sort of my audition, you know. He wanted to see me out in the wild. playing a gig, and I think it was shortly after that he called me for some work. So he knew me in the context of school, and then he came to one of my gigs, and that's how it happened. I think we made a record before we ever toured. I think I started hanging out with him at his apartment on 12th Street, and I think we made this record subsequently.
Yeah.
You liked my Chico Hamilton imitation, which I won't do right now, but and it was all out of love and for Chico Hamilton fans out there. But because Chico was his first, kind of big gig, Jim's, and anyway, that's kind of related to why the record was called Subsequently, because that was a word that Chico liked to use indiscriminately. That's how it happened. Yeah, it was great. And I always think that I wasn't quite ready to do that, to play with Jim, but, and I wish it happened maybe 10 years later, but of course, it's ridiculous. It was just such a great, unbelievable experience. I learned so much from him. He was very much like a father figure.
How was he like as a band leader? I mean, like,
great. I mean, he comes from he went to a conservatory, so he's got some habits, I think, that he borrowed from that discipline, where he tries to be as specific as possible in his scores and his charts, so that the least amount of explanation is needed, and if he did need to advise you of things, it usually had to do with, maybe concentrate more on this part of the piano, just kind of make sure you're listening to where I am in the register. He inspired you to play less, because he could play so economically, with so much meaning, and you didn't want to be the guy who was playing with a lot of chops and unnecessary notes. He was such an idea person, and also his sound was so beautiful that it made you want to think about that. And he was an excellent leader. I'm just watching his habits, things that he would do, the way he would always have a set list, and he would save his set lists, and he'd look through them on index card. Oh, that was a good one. Let's do that one.
Oh wow.
And not overthink it too much. Where I can just get so looking at the list. Oh, that's not going to work. Oh, but and we traveled in so many different, not so many, but different contexts, and we did one whole tour duo, we did tours trio, we did tours quartet. It was amazing. Just amazing.
I can believe that.
He was.
I can believe that. Yeah, and you were still so young, basically, right? When you
I was pretty young. I was in my late 20s or early 30s.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, and
when I met. Is that right? No, because I met him, I was definitely younger than that. No, I was in my 20s. Yeah, because I met him, I was in school. So, I was in my 20s.
Yeah, subsequently came out 92, I think, right? Or 91, 92.
Yeah. Something like that.
30 years ago, yeah. Did through Jim Paul and Scofield get to know you, or how did the Scofield connection, hand jive, and that begin?
I'm not sure. I know that I actually met him as a result of hearing that he had a rehearsal space in the basement of his apartment complex that he lived in, where he was looking for someone to rent it out.
Oh, okay.
And I had just bought my first organ, which was in my little apartment, and I don't know. I got the idea that somebody said, well, maybe you could rent out Scofield's space and leave your organ there. And I think that's how we first played. Because my organ was there, and he's like, yeah, let's play in there one of these days. And I think I guess by then he had heard me on a record or two, and thought of me as a piano player and an organ, actually. I mean, I played both on that gig, and maybe he heard me with Maceo. I'm not sure, but I don't remember if somebody specifically recommended me or if he just heard me somewhere. But definitely, we connected personally because of that rehearsal space, and then we played maybe with Bill. Could have been another drummer that we played with down there, but. And then I was on his Hang Jive record, and then we toured, and luckily we still collaborate.
Yeah, it's amazing.
To this day.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's
another big influence for me, John. His playing, his writing, his band leading, how he very carefully thinks about his recording projects or just his touring projects, very, very thoughtful, and the range of music that he's into really collides with mine, and senses of humor, and he's just great.
Yeah, he's a monster. How did, in the midst of all this organ influenced funk that you were playing, awareness happen? I love that record. And
which one?
Awareness with Paul Motian and Larry.
Oh, Awareness.
How did that one come about? I mean, like,
right. I mean, I think, I think Warner Brothers wanted to make a relatively cheap record quickly, because I think they were gonna drop me after that, and so that was one reason. I mean, we had talked about me playing more piano, and I guess I wanted to do something that was, for whatever reason, I wanted to do something that was maybe a little less standardy, and typical in terms of like I didn't, Brad Maldo was on the label.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So many great. There's always so many great piano players, and I don't know. I wasn't sure how I measured up to the other like really swinging piano players. So I thought, well, maybe this will be different. I always loved that. Well, of course, I'm a huge Keith Jarrett fan, and I also love that the trio with Bill Frisell and Paul Motian. It was big, and Joe Lavana.
Yeah, that's one of my
about
favorites.
to play with Joe.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm actually replacing Joey DeFrancesco he's just in a trio at SF Jazz, San Francisco Jazz, with Lewis Nash and Joe Nee.
Oh, wow, beautiful.
But yeah, I just love the freeness. I mean, I was, I have lots of different sides of me, I guess. I wanted to, I guess, be in a little freer setting, and I don't know. Yeah. Thinking back, and really stupidly, I didn't have Paul on the whole record. I should have. I thought, man, maybe I'll do some solo, duo, and trio, And now I think about that, I'm like, what are you, nuts? All Motion would have stayed, would have been there for 2 full days. But it was a great experience, and I don't know what else to say about it. I had some tunes that I thought would be right for that trio.
I love the writing on that one. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and we didn't even really do one gig with that trio. We did like sort of 3 tunes at Carnegie Hall as part of this concert, but it's a shame. But that was nice, and nice to hear when people know that record. But
you still want to explore that side of you, like this, like more, or I mean, do you still want to do like this, like piano trio record, like bass drums with this more open? I would love to hear some more of that from you, like
Definitely, that would be really nice, really fun to do something else like that. Sure.
Yeah. You mentioned the writing.
I think you're frozen. There you are.
You mentioned the writing on that one, and you have written so much different music, and Let's Get Lots, like from the last one, I love that one. But like, what's your process when you write? How do you get a tune together? I mean, does it take you a long time, or?
Usually it happens pretty quick. Sometimes it happens as a result of being at a certain instrument or on a certain sample. Like I really like to write on sampled sounds, guitar sounds sometimes.
Oh, really? Oh,
sometimes
wow.
I write at the piano, sometimes I write at the organ. I'm trying to just get in the habit of having my phone near so I can, capture ideas. I've written some things where I run Logic and I just have one idea and then I stop and then I record it and I stop and then I try to write the next part of the idea. Other times it comes to me really quickly, even away from an instrument. A couple tunes have come to me walking or in the shower or something like that, where I can just sort of see it happening. So all different ways, but I do. It's important to capture the process, I think, because sometimes I can't think of all the hours of good stuff that I've just lost because I'm just playing and
the initial idea,
not capturing it. I want to do more of like what Kurt Rosenwinkel, I think, has done, and that is he records himself improvising and then takes down and edits it, and keeps a lot of things that I think that's one reason why some of his tunes have that very kind of subconscious kind of quality, that a lot of it is coming from the original improvisation with editing, and also that's how you get maybe longer forms too, where I think I get stuck into like 32 bars, or like more predictable forms, and I like it takes some discipline and some time, but like to just this concept of recording yourself in doing a longer improvisation and not limiting yourself to like a typical form, just like thinking longer, and I want to write longer form pieces. I think that would be a good project for the trio because we're not known for recording things like that. But yeah, it comes in all sorts of forms. Sometimes I'm thinking like this is a song that that would be for a lyricist, to put lyrics to. And then sometimes that does happen, and other times it just doesn't. It just becomes a melodic instrumental. But lots of times, and that's kind of the way I started writing with lyricists is singers or songwriters would come to me and say, that song needs a lyric, but sometimes I'll be so impatient while listening to something that really inspires me, and I'll shut it off and I'll go, I want to write something like that, So that happens quite a bit. Like I'll just be like, that's a great idea. Do something like that. And then I'll try my version of something that's directly inspired by the thing that I was just listening to.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was just having that experience yesterday well, no, recently I put something on my Instagram, and I was writing on a guitar sound, and that was directly because I saw my friend Lau Noah playing in France when I was there on a night off. I was totally thinking about, you know, maybe this was something that Lau would play, you know. So that came from a direct, you know, influence. And then, but I do like to have like a specific sound, whether I'm sitting at the organ, sitting at the synth with something that isn't a piano or an organ sound. One of the reasons why I like a guitar sound is because, you know, the way you make a guitar sample sound more realistic is playing within more or less the confines of how what a guitar can do. And I think having limitations gets you to focus on some different things, you know.
Makes sense, yeah. Voice
leading and you know, it sort of clears away some of the nodiness that we can get into. Of course, many guitar players are notey, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
in terms of numbers, in terms of the number of voices and the possibilities you have, I think it's important to introduce limits to yourself as one way to write.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I mean, I sometimes write a tune and then I'm like, shit, that's something similar what I wrote 10 years ago. I mean, maybe that's not even bad, or it is, but you know, then I immediately kind of suspend the idea because it's like, I feel like, okay, this has been done, but just to find a new way how to think about composition.
Usually it comes out of an improvisation. That's kind of what I do when I go to an instrument, is I just start looking for sounds or looking for chordal relationships, or I just start improvising, and then I'll be on this one thing for a while and I go, well, maybe I should just concentrate on that, you know, and try to finish that.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to ask you one thing. You mentioned before, you know, you've done a lot of studio work and played with one of my favorites, James Taylor, for such a long time. But I think I hear you at least twice or three times a week. I teach, you know, Gravity, John Mayer solo, like a lot because it's so basic in a sense, but it's so good also. Like, how did you end up on a gig like that? And like knowing, I mean, that organ part is like the most crucial part of that tune, for instance, like.
Well, through Steve Jordan specifically.
Oh, okay.
Steve, I knew back in the New York days, and he was in town, and like typical of Steve, he would call me like the day before he was asking me for something. So it was one of those deals like, hey, I'm here with John Mayer. Can you come in tomorrow, you know, doing a session? And I think that's how I originally met John, although it could have been when John Scofield did his Ray Charles record.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure which came first because I have COVID brain, but but that was certainly the first time I really got to spend some time with him, and that was it. They had already recorded the basic tracks, and he was a great producer, John. Well, Steve was producing too, I guess, but John really knew what he wanted. He wanted a very static part that didn't have a lot of Leslie movement. And yeah, that's how we met. I think that was the only track I was on that record.
Yeah.
And then he called me for a tour after that, which I had to decline because I'd already committed to James. And then he tried again the next year or a couple years later when it was going to be Pino and
Steve probably,
Steve and me. Not Steve Ferroni, Steve Jordan. Yeah, and it just the timing worked out, and that's how I ended up going on the road with him and playing some more on his that record.
Yeah,
The meaning of everything, or what was it called?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that's how that has started, and I owe it to Steve, really, for bringing me in.
Okay.
Steve was also involved in that Scofield record too. He was the drummer on that one.
Yeah.
The record. So that's how that happened, from a previous relationship with Steve, and yeah,
it's amazing. Fun. Like when I check your, especially the guitarists you played with, it's just incredible. It's just, I think you played with everyone. Almost like interesting to have this connection.
The one that I haven't really done a full project with, or tour, or really much live recording is live playing is Bill Frisell.
Oh yeah,
and
wow,
he's one of my favorites, and I just really want to do something with Bill Frisell one of these days. That'd be really cool.
Oh man, that would be amazing. Yeah, he hasn't done an organ trio yet, actually, or has he? I don't think so. I don't think he has an organ trio. Yeah. Come on, that's an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, but Larry, just not to take more of your time, I know you have other obligations, but like, what are your plans for the future? I mean, like gigging wise and touring or project wise for the next couple of months, or?
I've got something. I've got something coming up with the trio in the next 3 months. Part of December, part of January, and the better part of February. That'll be in Europe with Bill and Peter. And I just did this solo tour.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
That's definitely giving me some ideas of other kinds of things I could do. I have this duo with this incredible dancer, Melinda Sullivan, and we want to do some live stuff too. She's a great tap dancer. You can see us on my Instagram.
I have to check it out. Okay.
She's like a drummer. She's fantastic. So we want to do some stuff. Scary Goldings, as I said, I think is going to have a tour of some sort in the summer, hopefully. There seems to be a lot. We did this big Paris jazz festival with SCO and Mono Neon, and that seemed to drum up some interest in that specific band. We're doing a version of that this month in LA at the Echoplex with SCO and Will Lee on bass, because Mono couldn't do it.
That'll be awesome.
And I've been recording for this label, this new label called Color Field, which is like more experimental electronic stuff. I've got this LP called Earthshine, which is very different. It's more experimental and sonically driven, and we're little by little putting together sort of like the volume 2 of that, and
yeah, that's a lot already, man.
That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, fantastic.